Don't you want to try it, sweetheart? I made it just for you. The words came from my husband, Daniel, but they didn't feel like love. They felt rehearsed, forced. We were sitting at his sister's immaculate dining table in Charleston, South Carolina, at one of those family brunches that always looked picture perfect on the outside. Mimosas, fresh roses, too much smiling, but left me with a lingering ache in my stomach. I'm Valerie Brooks, 31 years old, and I used to believe love could withstand anything. But that morning, staring into a cup of coffee that smelled faintly of metal, I began to wonder if love could also be weaponized. Sitting across from me, Rachel, Daniel's older sister, and my so-called friend, absently stirred her untouched cup. Her eyes never left mine. Daniel's been experimenting with all sorts of brews lately, she said with a small, unreadable smile. He's so thoughtful. I nodded and returned the smile, but my fingers tightened around the porcelain. I hadn't told anyone, not even my parents, but I'd been hospitalized 3 times in the last 6 months. Each time, the symptoms were different: sudden vomiting, fainting, blurred vision. And each time, it followed a meal at Rachel's house or something Daniel had cooked for me with love. I used to believe it was just bad luck, maybe food allergies, or my body reacting to stress. But last month, I started writing it all down: dates, symptoms, who made what. And slowly, an awful pattern began to emerge. Today, the metallic scent rising from that coffee felt familiar, like the tea from last month that sent me to urgent care, like the smoothie that left me curled up on the bathroom floor for hours. "I'll be right back," I said, grabbing my phone. "Work call." I stood, walking past Rachel's chair, and pretended to stumble, knocking our mugs into each other in a flurry of apology. "I'm such a klutz," I said with a nervous laugh. Rachel waved it off. "Just don't spill anything in my office," she said, her tone flat. I took both mugs with me and walked toward the study. But instead of sipping my drink, I left the swapped cup behind and stood behind the half-closed door. From that spot, I could watch everything. And wait. For those who've shared decades with a spouse or trusted family, imagine realizing the threat doesn't come from strangers, but from someone who kisses your forehead every morning. How many signs have we ignored in the name of love? And when does caution stop being paranoia and start being self-preservation? From my position in the hallway, just beyond the edge of the study door, I could see them, Daniel and Rachel, still at the table, chatting casually like nothing was off. The mug I'd switched now rested in front of Rachel. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. I was watching their faces. Rachel's perfectly manicured hand reached for the coffee. She lifted the cup, paused, then slowly took a sip. My breath caught in my chest. I gripped the doorframe, the smooth wood cool against my palm, as a jolt of fear and anticipation ran through me. She set the cup down, but something in her face shifted. Her eyes blinked rapidly. Her expression, once smug, twitched into uncertainty. Then her hand began to tremble. Subtly at first, but growing sharper by the second. "Daniel," she said, her voice tight. "Something's wrong." Daniel's head whipped around. I saw panic flicker across his face before he tried to mask it. "What do you mean?" Rachel stood up, swaying as if the floor beneath her had tilted. "My heart's racing. I feel dizzy." She reached for the back of the chair, but missed, knocking over her glass instead. The crash echoed through the quiet room. That was the moment Daniel lost control of the narrative. "That wasn't supposed to be your cup," he blurted out, lunging toward her. I stepped out from behind the door, phone in hand, already recording. "And whose cup was it supposed to be, Daniel?" He froze mid-step, his face draining of color. "Valerie, I can explain." "Explain what?" I asked, walking toward him with deliberate calm. "How you and your sister have been slowly poisoning me for months, or how today's coffee was supposed to finish the job." Rachel collapsed to her knees, gasping. "Call 911, she cried out. "Please." I didn't hesitate. I dialed. "Emergency services? I need an ambulance at 215 Oak Grove Lane. My sister-in-law appears to be having a severe reaction. Yes, she's conscious, but barely. No, I haven't consumed anything, yet. I ended the call and turned the camera toward Daniel's pale, stunned face. She drank my cup, I said quietly but firmly. That's what's happening. You both thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. Rachel was on the floor, her body twitching, her face contorted in pain. This wasn't supposed to happen, she gasped. You said it was just enough to keep her home. Daniel bent down beside her, frantic now. Hang on, help's coming. His panic was real, but it wasn't for Rachel, it was for himself. Because in his mind, the worst thing happening wasn't her reaction. It was their plan unraveling. You should stop talking, I told them. Everything you say is being recorded. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. I looked down at Rachel, once so composed, now clutching her side and muttering incoherently. Daniel looked up at me, pleading, but there was no excuse left to give. You were going to let me die, I said, voice steady despite the fury beneath it. And now, you're going to answer for it. As flashing red and blue lights filled the front windows, I stepped aside to let the EMTs through. I handed over the coffee mug. Start with this, I told them, because whatever's in it, it wasn't brewed with love. The ride to Charleston General was a blur of flashing lights, frantic whispers, and the low thrum of a monitor strapped to Rachel's chest. I sat beside her in the ambulance, silent but alert. A paramedic worked steadily over her, adjusting the IV and jotting notes. Rachel's eyes fluttered open for a moment and met mine. Her pupils were dilated, her lips pale. Gone was the elegance, the smug control. What stared back at me was fear and guilt. You switched the cups, she murmured, barely audible over the siren. I did, I said softly, because I finally stopped ignoring what my instincts were screaming for months. At the hospital, a team of nurses rushed her into a trauma bay while I remained in the waiting area, clutching my phone. The video I'd recorded was already backed up to my private cloud and emailed to both myself and a lawyer friend I trusted. I wasn't going to let them bury this. Not this time. 20 minutes passed. I kept expecting Daniel to walk in behind me with some false excuse and a look of concern painted on his face. But he didn't. He was probably figuring out how to spin this, how to keep his name clean while pinning it all on Rachel. I'd seen enough of his crisis mode before to know the pattern. Family of Rachel Vance? A nurse called, scanning the quiet waiting area. I stood. I'm her sister-in-law, Valerie Brooks. She nodded. She's stabilized. The doctor wants to speak with you about her toxicology screen. They led me past swinging double doors into a private consultation room where a tall, silver-haired physician stood beside a medical monitor. Mrs. Brooks, I'm Dr. Linwood. Your sister-in-law had several substances in her system, including one we don't typically find outside of pharmaceutical testing labs. I blinked. So, this wasn't an accident. His expression was grave. Number. The levels were high enough that, had you consumed the coffee, the outcome could have been fatal. We're notifying law enforcement. As if summoned, Daniel appeared down the hallway, shirt slightly wrinkled, forehead glistening. His eyes flicked between the nurse and the doctor, calculating. Valerie, he said, holding out a hand like we were just having a marital disagreement. I need to explain. You need to stop talking, I interrupted, stepping away. The police will want your statement. I didn't mean for this to happen, he said, his voice cracking. Rachel said it would just make you sick for a day or two. We were trying to help you slow down. By poisoning me? I stared at him, astonished by the twisted justification. Or was it because I landed the Whitmore account instead of you? Or because your client started asking for me instead of you and Rachel? Daniel went quiet. The air between us felt heavy with years of lies I'd overlooked. The doctor spoke again. We've informed the hospital security. A detective is already on her way. I took a deep breath. Good, because I've been keeping records. I opened my purse and pulled out my second phone. I started tracking everything months ago. Every symptom, every date, every meal or drink I was given by either of them. I even recorded some of their conversations. Nothing too obvious, but Rachel slipped more than once. I have audio of her saying they needed me off the playing field. Before the Henderson pitch, Dr. Linwood's eyebrows rose. That's substantial. The door opened again, this time revealing a woman in a navy blazer with a badge clipped to her belt. Detective Raina Griffin, Charleston PD, she introduced herself. I'm here to take statements. I handed her my phone. This is the recording from brunch. I also have texts and a documented pattern of symptoms aligned with meetings and meals. Detective Griffin took a seat, flipping through my notes and listening through headphones. Her eyes darkened as she scribbled into her notebook. These are serious allegations. They're not just allegations, I said. Rachel's in a hospital bed because she drank what was meant for me. That coffee wasn't an accident. It was a pattern that escalated. And I have 6 months of evidence. Behind the glass of the trauma bay, I could see Rachel lying still, her arm connected to multiple tubes. Whatever confidence she once held had drained out like the color from her cheeks. Did either of them ever admit intent? Griffin asked. In one recording, Rachel says they just needed me out of the way for the Henderson proposal. Daniel says he's using something stronger this time, and that she won't make it. You tell me what that sounds like. The detective's jaw tightened. It sounds like we'll be making arrests. Detective Raina Griffin didn't waste time. As soon as she reviewed the recording from brunch, the text messages, and my detailed health logs, she made 2 calls, one to the hospital's head of security and another to the Charleston Magistrate's office to initiate a warrant for both Daniel and Rachel's residences and workplaces. We need to secure evidence now, she said firmly, before anything can be destroyed. Rachel was still in a hospital bed, recovering from her own mistake. Ironically, the very trap she'd helped set for me. Daniel, meanwhile, sat quietly outside her room, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. I watched from behind the one-way glass, and for the first time in years, I saw him not as a husband, but as a stranger unraveling. Less than an hour later, another detective arrived at the hospital with an evidence bag. He nodded grimly as he handed it to Raina. These were recovered from Daniel Brooks's desk at South Shore Creative, he said, hidden in a locked drawer. Raina unzipped the bag and pulled out 3 small vials with white pharmaceutical labels, clinical compounds used for controlled trials. Alongside them were neatly typed notes, dosage amounts, reaction times, and Valerie-specific data. My name, initials, even references to my schedule were scribbled into the margins. Each page was a blow to the gut. It was as if I had been the subject of a private experiment, one neither ethical nor survivable. Raina scanned the labels, her face tightening. These aren't over-the-counter anything. This one is used to induce gastrointestinal stress in lab animals. And this, she held up another vial, is flagged as hazardous even in controlled doses. How did he get them? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Initial trace says a friend of his from college works at a pharmaceutical trial lab, the other officer said. They've confirmed missing samples. So Daniel hadn't just used Rachel's jealousy to drive the plot. He'd weaponized professional connections, manipulating people and protocols like pieces on a chessboard. Rachel had stirred the pot out of envy. But Daniel? He had studied me, mapped out my pain like data. His betrayal was methodical. Raina took out her notepad. We'll need formal interviews, but I want to confirm one thing first. When did you begin to suspect it wasn't just bad luck? The 3rd time I ended up in urgent care, I answered. And the doctors couldn't explain it. I stopped trusting explanations and started writing things down. She nodded. You did the right thing. People are often gaslit into doubting their own experience. especially when the harm is coming from someone they love. She stepped into Rachel's hospital room, with me trailing behind. Rachel looked up, face pale, the weight of what she'd done dragging her spirit down like an anchor. "Rachel Vance," Raina said, her tone level but clipped. "We've found medical-grade toxins in your system that match substances recovered from your brother's desk. Would you like to tell us how they got into Valerie Brooks' coffee?" Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper. "It was never supposed to go this far. I wanted her to miss a presentation or two. Not, not die?" I asked quietly, arms crossed. "Because that's where this was headed." Rachel winced. "I didn't know he'd switched the dosage. He kept saying it wasn't working fast enough." She kept bouncing back. Raina raised an eyebrow. "So you escalated and documented it." Rachel's gaze dropped to the edge of the blanket. "We were losing accounts. Clients started requesting her. He said if she had to step back for a while, we could stabilize things." "You dosed me like a threat to neutralize," I said, the words burning. Rachel turned her face away. Raina pulled out a small recorder. "Ms. Vance, anything else you'd like to add before we conclude this interview?" Rachel hesitated. Then, "Check Daniel's laptop. He kept a spreadsheet. Dosages, timelines, projected reactions. He said it was just a way to fine-tune the outcome." Fine-tune the outcome. As if my body was a lab test, not a life. Outside the room, Raina looked at me. "That's enough to bring full charges. We'll obtain the laptop and move forward with arrests tonight." I stared at Rachel through the glass as they began unhooking her monitors in preparation for police custody. The woman who once toasted my birthday with champagne had become the architect of my near collapse, and Daniel, who once held my hand during a flu, tucked me in when I was sick, had turned clinical. Cold. He never loved me, he logged me. I stepped away, my voice steady. "Let me know when the warrant is executed," I said. "I'll be ready to testify." The courtroom at Charleston County Courthouse was quiet the morning the trial began, but the tension was deafening. The public gallery was filled with reporters, former clients, and a few distant colleagues I hadn't seen since before the scandal broke. I sat at the front, flanked by my attorney and a victim advocate, my hands steady, but my heart pacing faster than I let show. Rachel Vance and Daniel Brooks, my sister-in-law and husband of 6 years, sat at the defense table, no longer the polished professionals they once were. Rachel looked fragile, almost ghostly, as if the weight of everything had finally sunk in. Daniel, in contrast, looked like a shell. Vacant eyes, stiff posture, his once confident air replaced by panic masked in silence. The state opened its case with authority. "This is not a story of accidental harm," the prosecutor began. "This is a calculated campaign of targeted poisoning, perpetrated over 6 months, with the intent to disable and discredit Mrs. Valerie Brooks, both professionally and personally." Each day of the 3-week trial peeled back another layer of betrayal. The prosecution presented my medical history, linking each hospital visit to food or drink given to me by Daniel or Rachel. They introduced the toxicology reports, comparing the substances found in Rachel's system to those recovered from Daniel's office. But the most damning evidence came from their own hands. Printed spreadsheets retrieved from Daniel's laptop detailed dosages, reactions, and goals like "ensure Valerie misses Henderson pitch" and "increase compound X, too mild last time." Each entry was dated and matched my personal records. Dr. Linwood, the toxicologist who treated Rachel, took the stand with confidence. He explained how the compound levels had been increasing gradually, pushing the line between discomfort and life-threatening reactions. "This was not random," he said firmly. "The pattern is deliberate, escalating, controlled." I sat through it all, through every testimony, every chart showing how my health was methodically dismantled. I never once looked away. Daniel's defense attempted to paint the situation as misguided concern. His attorney claimed he was overwhelmed by our work life. worried about my stress levels, and convinced by Rachel's influence to help me rest. But that narrative crumbled when the jury heard Rachel's confession. Her voice played through the courtroom speakers, shaky but clear. We just wanted her out of the way for a little while. She kept winning. Clients loved her. Daniel said if she took a step back, we could finally catch up. When it was my turn on the stand, I walked slowly, deliberately, to the witness box. I answered every question clearly. When the prosecutor asked how I discovered the truth, I told them about the brunch, about the swapped coffee, about watching Rachel convulse and realizing it was the confirmation I never wanted, but needed. I trusted them, I said, looking directly at the jury. I sat at their table, drank what they gave me, smiled through my pain, because I thought they cared. But all along, they were studying me like a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved. Rachel sobbed quietly. Daniel stared straight ahead. When the jury returned with their verdict, the entire courtroom seemed to stop breathing. We, the jury, find the defendants, Rachel Vance and Daniel Brooks, guilty of attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit a felony, and unlawful possession of controlled substances. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply let out a long, quiet breath I felt I had been holding for months. The judge's voice was firm, his gavel final. Given the premeditated nature of these crimes and the emotional and physical harm caused to the victim, the court sentences each defendant to the maximum term allowed under South Carolina law. As they were handcuffed, Daniel finally turned toward me, lips parted as if to say something, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of hearing it. I stood and walked out of the courtroom without a backward glance. Outside, the sky was cloudy, the kind that felt heavy with rain but hadn't yet broken open. Reporters called my name. I said nothing. The legal chapter was closed, but healing was its own slow process, one that wouldn't come with a single verdict, but with time, clarity, and truth. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I played the recording of the verdict once more, not out of vengeance, but for peace, because for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. 1 year after the verdict, I stood on the stage at the Southeastern Women in Leadership Conference, facing a sea of sharp minds, fierce hearts, and hopeful eyes. The room was filled with founders, executives, and young professionals who had flown in from across the country. My name, Valerie Brooks, flashed behind me on the large screen. Below it, the words, Keynote Speaker, Rising Beyond Betrayal. I took a breath. Not long ago, I had sat on a hospital gurney, watching my sister-in-law fight for breath after drinking what had been meant for me. I had walked out of a marriage that should have been a partnership, only to learn I'd been the target of a calculated, months-long sabotage campaign. Now I stood taller, not because I'd forgotten, but because I'd survived. The Henderson account, I began, my voice steady, was the first major win of my career. And ironically, it became the thing others tried to take from me, not by outworking me, but by disabling me. The room fell silent, the kind of silence where even the air feels still. Some of you may know my story, I continued, and if you don't, you've likely heard one like it. Not all sabotage looks like a hostile takeover. Sometimes it wears a familiar face. Sometimes it pours your morning coffee. That earned a murmur, a ripple of uncomfortable recognition. But here's what matters, I said. I'm still here. After the trial, I took time off. Not much, but enough to sit with the pieces of my life and ask, who was I when no one was watching? I wasn't just the victim in a high-profile poisoning case. I was a strategist, a leader, a woman who had been underestimated and had come out sharper for it. It didn't take long for the professional world to take notice. The Henderson firm not only renewed their contract, they publicly praised my grace under pressure and awarded me additional accounts. 3 new clients followed within months. By fall, I'd been named Regional Marketing Director for a new agency in Atlanta, where I now mentor a team of 10, 7 of whom are women under 35, many of them with stories not unlike mine. As for Daniel and Rachel, their story had faded to a footnote in business news and courtroom blogs. They were both serving time, one in a state prison, the other in a women's facility outside Columbia. I didn't follow their trials or their appeals. I didn't need to. Justice had been served. My job now was to live beyond them. I left the stage to applause, but what meant more were the conversations afterward. One woman, probably in her 60s, approached me with tears in her eyes. "I stayed in a toxic marriage for 40 years," she whispered. "I wish I'd had your courage at your age." Her words stuck with me. Because courage doesn't feel like roaring strength when you're in the middle of it. It feels like writing down symptoms no one else believes. Like hiding a second phone. Like smiling at brunch while you pray what's in your cup won't kill you. A few weeks later, I received an email from the Henderson client, the same one Daniel and Rachel had tried so hard to sabotage. They were offering me an expanded partnership, including international campaigns and a permanent leadership role. I didn't respond right away. I took a walk through downtown Atlanta, past old brick storefronts and new high-rise towers, letting the offer settle in. Then I went home, made myself a cup of coffee, black, untainted, and mine, and wrote back, "I accept, fully, and without hesitation." Some might say the best revenge is success, but I don't believe this was about revenge at all. It was about restoration, about taking back everything they tried to chip away: my health, my reputation, my confidence, and building something stronger in its place. My name is Valerie Brooks. I was poisoned by the two people I trusted most. But I am not defined by that betrayal. I am defined by what I did next. And I hope that wherever someone is reading this, feeling small, dismissed, or cornered, they know it's possible to rise again. Not just in spite of the pain, but because of it. As we grow older, many of us are taught to value loyalty, forgiveness, and giving loved ones the benefit of the doubt. But there comes a time when wisdom means recognizing danger, even when it wears a familiar face. Valerie's story reminds us that intuition is not paranoia. It's the quiet voice of experience telling us something isn't right. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people we built our lives around. That truth can be devastating, especially for those of us who've spent decades prioritizing family harmony over personal safety. But Valerie teaches us that it's never too late to draw a boundary, to gather evidence, and to protect our dignity. In every stage of life, we deserve safety, we deserve peace, and we deserve to be believed, especially by ourselves. If something feels wrong, pause. Document. Ask questions. Because silence can cost more than confrontation ever will, and healing begins the moment we choose truth over comfort.